In order to participate in the question and answer session, locate the QA button on the bottom of your screen. Click the button, which is highlighted in green on the PowerPoint slide, and remember to hit send after you type your question. Again, you can type and send your question at any time during the presentation. As a reminder, this session is being recorded, and a copy of this meeting and the presentation will be posted on the project's webpage early next week. We ask you to invite your friends and neighbors who might be interested in the project to watch the video and fill out a comment form or send us an email if they have questions. The project team consists of consultants working collaboratively with the department and include Rod Nelson, who is the MDT District Administrator for the Billings District, Mike Taylor, MDT Billings District Pre-Construction Engineer, Mark Stute, MDT Consultant Project Engineer, Dustin Hyrose, who is HDR's Project Manager. Next is our road design lead, Tessa Warmers, who works with Sanderson Stewart. Sanderson Stewart is HDR's teaming partner. Lastly is John Schick, HDR's environmental lead. You've already met me, Lisa Gray. I'll be your point of contact for the project. Now I'm going to turn the meeting over to MDT's Mike Taylor.
All right, thank you, Lisa, and thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to join us today. As Lisa mentioned, my name is Mike Taylor, and I'm the Billings District Pre-Construction Engineer for Montana Department of Transportation. So we're here today as part of our public involvement efforts, which is a vital part of MDT's project development process. So we're appreciative of the opportunity to share some information with you today. And in turn, we'd like to hear what you have to say. We'd be interested in your questions, comments, and concerns. I'll be giving a brief overview of the project. Then Dustin Hyrose with HDR will be presenting the design in more detail. This whole thing should take about 30 minutes to complete, and then we'll open it up to questions and comments. The project is led by MDT in cooperation with the Federal Highways Administration, Yellowstone County, and the City of Billings. MDT is contracted with HDR to be the lead project engineer, as well as the public information coordinator. The goal of the project is to improve the interstate in Billings to meet current safety and capacity needs. We'll do this in a couple ways. First, we'll be widening I90 from 2 lanes to 3 lanes in each direction between 27th Street interchange and the Lockwood interchange. And we'll also be reconstructing the 2 bridges over the Yellowstone River and 2 structures over the Talon Energy Railroad Spur line. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dustin. He'll speak in more detail about the project design elements, but again, don't hesitate to send in your questions and comments. And if you prefer, after the presentation, you can email the project team directly at any time, and that contact information will be made available at the end of the presentation. So with that, thank you, and I'll turn it over to Dustin.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and thanks to everyone on the meeting today for your interest in the project. I'm going to start just by reiterating our project location, because we do have a few projects out there in this area. And just to avoid confusion, our project is located on the interstate, of course, on I90 within the city limits of Billings. And it begins at the top of the 27th Street interchange and then runs in the eastbound direction, or geographically north, over the Talon Energy Rail Spur, over the Yellowstone River, and then ends at the top of the Lockwood interchange. So to be exact, our project begins at milepost 450.09 and ends at milepost 452.73. And if we did the math right, that should add up to exactly 2.64 miles of work. Okay, so just a little bit of background on the project. Back in 2012, the I90 corridor planning study was complete, and that's really where the project began. That study looked at about 22 miles of the interstate, I90 through the Billings area, and how the interstate would be impacted by the anticipated growth. And so the goal of the study was to identify transportation needs along the I90 corridor, mainly operational needs, possible upgrades to address safety issues, and certainly to address the need for additional capacity due to growth in the area. And so after that study was concluded, there were multiple projects that were developed. And our project, the I90 Yellowstone River Project, was one of them. So this section of interstate was built a while ago, back in the 60s. And since then, there's been minimal improvements to it. There's been some maintenance work, some pavement upgrades, guardrail improvements, and it was last paved in the year 2000. And so the infrastructure is certainly aging, and it's due for some improvements. So since the planning study was complete, again back in 2012, MDT nominated this project for development, and that's when we came on board and we started the design process back in 2015. And so as it stands now, we are putting the finishing touches on the design, and we're going to be submitting final plans and specifications at the end of March. And from that point, the project will be packaged up. It'll be advertised to contractors for bidding. And then ultimately our goal is to have this project begin construction in the fall of this year, so fall of 2021. And I'll talk a little bit more about the schedule later on in this presentation. So a description of the work that we're going to do. Ultimately, the goal of the project is to replace the structures over the Yellowstone River, and then provide additional capacity on the interstate. So this work will include widening the roadway from 2 lanes. There's 2 lanes out there now, right? We're going to add an additional lane. So when the project is complete, there'll be 3 lanes in both the eastbound and westbound direction. During that work, we'll be updating the roadway to meet the current design standards. We'll be replacing the bridges over the Talon Energy Railroad Spur. And then one of the focal points of the project is to replace the bridges over the Yellowstone River. In fact, that's a rendering of what those bridges will look like off to the right on the slide here. The total estimated project cost or construction cost right now is coming in at about $60 million. So a few details on the Yellowstone River bridges. The photograph on the bottom of the slide is what's out there now. Those are the existing bridges, and there's a pair of them. And those 2 structures are functionally obsolete due to inadequate roadway width. The roadway width is only 28 feet wide, doesn't meet current design standards, and certainly can't handle the additional capacity that's needed in the area. And there's no real practical way to reuse those existing structures or try to widen them or retrofit them in place. The only real practical option in order to add an additional lane is to replace them. And so in fact, we're going to do that. We're going to replace them with a new pair of structures, and each of them will be about 1,000 feet long. And it's important to note that we've gone through a very extensive evaluations early on in the project where we looked at different bridge options, different span configurations, structure types, construction methods, and certainly looked at cost as well in determining what would be the best suited bridge alternate for this site. And so at the conclusion of that investigation, we zeroed in on a new 6-span steel structure. And that new bridge has piers located to minimize the impacts on the river and provide a balanced economical design. And just to articulate a little bit on how we're minimizing impacts on the river. So when we look at a new bridge, we want to make sure that we can adequately convey the water underneath, so hydraulic flows. And in this situation, making sure that we can convey ice and debris and the things like that that you typically expect on the Yellowstone River. And we also want to make sure that the bridge provides an adequate hydraulic opening such that we don't impact the floodplain or provide any raise in the water surface elevation. So compared to the existing bridges, we're actually reducing the footprint on the river in this area and thereby minimizing the environmental impacts. Another thing to point out about the structure is that right now the Jim Dutcher Trail extends along the west riverbank and goes underneath the bridges, and we'll be perpetuating that with this project. We'll actually need to reconstruct that trail with this project, but when it's all said and done, we're going to put it back in about the same location. Another important factor with the Yellowstone River bridges is that when you look at the construction time of these structures, it really consumes, it takes the most time compared to any of the other improvements that we're doing with the project. And so when you look at the short construction season in Montana, it's going to take 2 full seasons to build these structures. So we're going to build one structure in one season, and then in the following season, we'll build the other structure. And the goal is that during the winter shutdown period, we can open the interstate up and fully and allow 2 lanes in each direction. And so in order to do that, we are looking at accelerated bridge construction for this project to help meet that goal. And by doing that, we're going to implement precast deck panels into the project. And so compared to traditional methods of building a bridge deck, using these precast deck panels will prevent us from having to form the deck, place reinforcing steel, placing concrete, and then allowing that concrete to cure. So the precast deck panels will significantly reduce construction duration and reduce the risk of that work extending into the winter shutdown season. And this is just a schematic that shows what those new structures will look like when it's all said and done, actually from the driver's perspective. Again, we're going to have 2 new bridges there. Each one will have 3 lanes in the eastbound direction, 3 lanes in the westbound direction, and significantly wider shoulder width compared to what's out there now to meet current design standards. Okay. So the Talon Energy Rail Spur, we're also replacing these structures, and that photo on the right shows what's out there now. And again, these structures, there's really no practical way to widen them or preserve them in place. The only real way to accommodate the additional lane is to replace them. But instead of replacing them with a bridge, at this location, we are going to use a buried precast concrete arch. And what that does is it allows us to update the roadway to meet current design standards, but at the same time reduce the extent of roadway construction on either side of this crossing. So from the driver's perspective, you probably aren't going to notice any difference. It's just going to look like the roadway is kind of perpetuated over the railroad tracks. You probably won't even notice that a structure is there. But by using that precast arch, we're able to correct the roadway super elevation without having to raise the roadway grade in that region. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tessa, and Tessa is going to provide some details on the roadway features.
Great, thank you, Dustin. Hi, my name is Tessa Warmers, and I work for Sanderson Stewart, and I am the lead road design lead on the project. I just want to talk a little bit about some of the roadway specifics. The design speed along the interstate will be 70 miles per hour. And the posted speed limit will remain at 65 miles per hour for all vehicles. The I90 roadway will be reconstructed, and auxiliary lane will be added in both the east and westbound directions. The auxiliary lanes will be constructed from the 27th Street interchange to the Lockwood interchange, as Dustin mentioned. The widening for the extra lanes will occur to the inside of the existing driving lanes. This minimizes the need for new right-of-way, and in general, the design stays within existing right-of-way throughout the entire project length. We will improve safety of the road by flattening slopes, improving the bank of the roadway around the horizontal curves, and by providing barriers to separate and protect traffic. The pavement thickness is designed to accommodate the high volume of truck traffic along this portion of the interstate. And a new storm drain system will be constructed to minimize ponding along the roadway. A concrete barrier will be built in the roadway median to provide separation between opposing directions of traffic and to reduce headlight glare. We're also performing work at the interchanges. The on and off ramps on the east side of the 27th Street interchange and the ramps on the west side of the Lockwood interchange will be reconstructed. A second exit lane and dual left-hand turn lanes will be constructed at the Lockwood interchange eastbound off-ramp. The additional lanes better accommodate traffic demands and the high volume of semi-trucks at this location. A second exit lane will also be built at the 27th Street interchange westbound off-ramp to accommodate traffic demands. This is one of the few areas along the project that will require new right-of-way acquisition. And it'll just be a sliver from some existing parking area and will not impact any existing structures. And now I'll turn the presentation over to John to discuss some environmental items.
Thank you, Tessa. Hello, everyone. I'm John Schick. I work for HDR, and I'm the lead environmental analyst for the project. I wanted to touch on, a few of the pertinent environmental considerations for the project. The project is largely funded by federal dollars, so that triggers a review under the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. And similarly, state dollars are used to a lesser extent to fund the project. And that then triggers a review under our state environmental law, the Montana Environmental Policy Act, or MEPA. So the NEPA and MEPA compliance is a requirement, and that was accomplished through use of a categorical exclusion level of environmental document. This document and the environmental process in general, it looks at a broad range of resources, and it assesses the project's potential impact to those resources. The categorical exclusion was completed in March 2019. One of the predominant natural resources in the project area is obviously the Yellowstone River. It's an important resource in terms of fisheries and recreational resources. This project is going to minimize impact on the river. We've done that as Dustin has mentioned in the design process from a hydraulic perspective, but it also during construction, there's a tendency for effects to water quality, and so this project will minimize impact on the river through use of environmental standard specifications and special provisions, and these are essentially requirements that the construction contractor will need to follow, and specific to state and federal environmental regulations and procedures. Construction will also require certain state and federal permits, which will further direct how the project is constructed to minimize impact on water quality. Colson Park is another important resource in the project area. Section 4F and 6F are important laws that are in place that protect recreational resources from federal projects and provide opportunity for avoidance of these resources. For this project, this involved coordination with the city of Billings, their Parks and Recs department, specifically in terms of temporary occupancy of the park. There will be a need to stage equipment within the boundaries of the park. It'll be a temporary condition, and part of the coordination for Section 4F requires that the park be restored to its original pre-construction condition. There will be no permanent impacts to the park or decrease in the park size. And finally, I wanted to touch on the noise study that was conducted. Because the project adds capacity to the highway through addition of a new travel lane, federal regulations require conducting a noise analysis. And so this analysis involves taking measurements of existing noise levels in the project area and using specialized software to predict future traffic noise based on the future traffic volumes and the proposed highway configuration. The noise model can identify locations where future noise levels exceed certain thresholds established by the federal and state policies. And if it's necessary, it allows the designers to look at ways of mitigating or reducing the noise levels and mitigating the impacts of added traffic noise. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dustin to speak to the project schedule.
Yeah, thanks, John. So as I mentioned earlier, we're nearly complete with the design process. Final plans will be submitted at the end of March. The project will then go out for bid a little while after that. And then the goal is to begin construction in the fall of 2021. And so once it begins, the initial work will include building crossovers, and then also installation of some irrigation crossings that go underneath I90. That includes Lockwood Irrigation District pipe, and then there's also a new culvert for the Gray Eagle ditch. And so this work, the goal is to complete that work prior to winter shutdown of 2021. So that's phase one. And then the main interstate reconstruction work will begin the following season. So that would be 2022, and that's phase two. So the first item of work will be to rebuild the westbound roadway during that 2022 construction season. And then we'll get the whole westbound facility built, and then reopen the interstate up to 2 lanes in each direction during that winter shutdown period. And then the following season, which is in 2023, that's our phase 3, we're going to build the east side of the interstate. And there's just enough work that needs to be done that it's going to take another, or at least part of another season in 2024 to come back and do any final striping and signing and things like that, just to finish up the project. During construction, we're going to be maintaining 2-lane, 2-way traffic through the work zone. We are looking at options to navigate oversized loads through the work zone while the work is being completed. Again, during the winter shutdown period, our plan is to open the interstate up back to 4 lanes total. And then we are planning an emergency detour route just in case there's an accident on the interstate in the work zone, or for some reason we have to close the work zone during construction. We have a contingency plan to be able to manipulate traffic around that area. And so with that concludes our presentation, and I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa for some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Dustin, and a big thank you to all of our presenters. As previously mentioned, MDT will use public involvement from this online meeting as the project moves forward, and will continue to work closely with the community and other stakeholders. And MDT will host another meeting to discuss project construction. We hope you will stay involved with us. Now we'd like to open the meeting to questions. Remember, in order to participate in the question and answer session, please locate the QA button on the bottom of your screen. Type in your question and click the blue send button. And at this point, we don't have any questions in the queue. So if you have a question, please feel free to share it with us now. Christy, it appears you have your hand up. Can you type your question up so we can track it? Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. So what accommodations have been given to bicyclists and pedestrians is the question. And I'm going to turn that question over to Dustin.
Okay. Well, to the extent, and I think if I understand correctly, the question is related to permanent improvements and what accommodations will be provided. I guess if that's not correct, feel free to retype the question. But yeah, as
Yes,
it stands now.
That's correct, Dustin. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess regarding the bridge, we did look at back in the very early stages of design, we were asked to look at the ability to attach a pedestrian structure to the new Yellowstone River bridges. And so we looked at a few different things. We looked at, well, how can you do that? Can you attach a pedestrian structure below those bridges? Can you somehow attach it between them, or can you somehow attach it to the side of the bridges? In looking at that, there were certainly impacts that were hard to overcome, and one of them was cost. It had a pretty significant cost impact to those interstate structures to do that with this project. But in addition to that, there were other logistical issues that were difficult to overcome, and one of them was just how do you get the trail up to the elevation of the river structure? It looked like that would have impacts on right-of-way. You'd have to provide some fill on the floodplain, and so there would be floodplain impacts, and that's certainly a permitting issue. And just in general, the idea of having bicyclists and pedestrians on an access controlled facility, a high speed facility like the interstate, pose some safety issues. And so, based on the outcome of that work, it was decided to not move forward with bike and pedestrian accommodations on the structure.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. I appreciate that. The next question is, how long would you expect the Jim Dutcher Trail and Colson Park to be shut down for construction? And again, that will go to Dustin.
Okay, yeah, good question. Well, we're not planning on shutting down Colson Park. I mean, there'll still be access to Colson Park. We do have a construction permit in that area because the contractor will need to access the area in the immediate vicinity of the bridge in order to, build the new bridge and tear down the old bridge. We have been looking at, we originally looked at options of keeping the Jim Dutcher Trail that goes underneath the structures open during construction. But I don't think we're going to be able to do that. We're going to have to close that trail, mainly due to safety. There'll be a lot of heavy equipment in that area, working overhead and tearing down the new bridge and tearing down the old bridge and building the new bridge. And to keep that trail open during that time frame, is going to be a safety issue. And so I'm thinking we're going to have to close the trail during construction, at least in that area.
Thank you, Dustin. So the next question is about project cost, and it looks like we're the question is to compare the project costs now with the bike and pedestrian infrastructure, I think. And my understanding is we probably don't have costs right now for the work that was done previously for the bike and pedestrian infrastructure. Dustin, do we? We don't have that at our fingertips. That'd be something we'd have to go find.
Yeah, I can't recall off the cuff exactly what that was. What that cost was.
Okay, and so the project cost of this, the whole project cost at this point, again, was?
Yeah, the total construction cost is around $60 million.
Okay, all right, very good. So I think we've gone as far with that question as we can, Kathy. We are having a meeting to talk about bike and pedestrian infrastructure in the next week plus. So if you would make sure that you send me your email so that I can make sure you're part of that. You can reach me at lisa.gray@hdrinc.com, and it's on the last PowerPoint slide. So just make sure I have your email, and we can make sure you're part of that discussion. Okay, so the next question is, so there's no way to walk or bike across the bridge between Lockwood and Buildings. So I'm not sure that's 100% accurate. Mike, would you want to talk about the Lockwood project that's coming up a bit, or is this timely to do that?
Well, I think the answer to the question specifically is there is a 10-foot shoulder on the bridge. So if there's no pedestrian restrictions from the interstate. So if they're within the interstate system, and yeah, they could use the shoulder across the bridge.
Okay.
The right answer for that question.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your answer, Mike. I appreciate it. Okay. So Christy is answering the question that the infrastructure was $8 million. Okay. Well, Christy, that's I know you were on the email from this morning's meeting, so that's a discussion that we can have when we have our upcoming meeting about bikes and pets. So I think you're already on that, and I have your email, so we'll make sure that you're a part of that. Okay, the next question is about bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So Kathy, again, I think we'll just move on. We've talked about that, and we're going to have a meeting to discuss that specifically. Oh, thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that. Good, thanks. Christy Drake's questions are what public comments are considered in the implementation of this project. I will take that one. My understanding is that there were multiple stakeholder meetings around this project. there were a number of meetings with TrailNet specifically about the adding the PED and, oh, there's more questions coming. When were those meetings? Christy, I'll have to, I can't get that information for you right now, but we can get that information from you. I know that there were meetings with the district and TrailNet. So I will look back through and find that information, and it can be part of the upcoming meetings we have. Okay, there are more questions about the meetings with TrailNet, and I cannot answer them for you right now. My apologies. We are planning on meeting with the group and a number of folks that are on this call, as well as the folks that were on this morning's call. And that's really the best that I can do for right now. So are there other questions about project design or information that we can talk with you? If there are other things that we can talk with you about. So let's keep this open for a couple more minutes. If there are other questions that we can ask of our project engineers. I'm going to give us another minute, so it'll be silent for just a minute, but if you come up with any other questions, please let us know. Okay, so while we're waiting, for questions about the project, I want to thank everybody for attending today. We understand completely that everyone's busy and a lot going on in their lives, and we appreciate hearing from the public. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Christy, for your comments. We have one more question about a clarification. Dustin, we might need a clarification on the Jim Dutcher Trail being closed from 2022 to 2024. Is she understanding that correctly?
Right. Yeah, I think that is correct. We did originally plan to open the trail periodically and require it be open during the winter shutdown period. But I think the more we look at that, it just is going to be very difficult to do that and maintain safe access underneath that structure. Because there is work that the contractor will be doing during the winter that doesn't impact traffic. So although the interstate is opened up to 4 lanes, so the interstate's opened up fully, you'll have the contractor down there near the bridge, possibly building the work bridge for the next structure, installation of riprap and things like that, it's likely not going to be very safe to have pedestrians walking underneath the bridge while that's happening.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. And thank you for the clarification. So the question is, can changes be made to the design if people comment now? And I guess that would really depend on what the comments are. Christy, can you write back to me and ask, or just let me know, is this the bike ped design change? Is that what you're interested in discussing? Okay, just wondering if public comments are relevant. Public comments are relevant. That's why we're opening it up to whether they be, okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that answer. I appreciate it. Public comments are relevant. There are some things that we can change now and some things that we can't change. It depends if it's based on safety or whatever the reason for changes are made. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that, but we are interested in what the public has to say and what they think about our projects. We believe that it makes our projects better hearing from the public. I think just by the fact that we heard from folks this morning concerned with the bike and ped infrastructure, and that we are opening up a meeting for folks who are really interested in that part of in getting more information about that. I think that says that we're open to having those discussions. So let me go through my list here and see if we have anything else. Thank you, Kathy. That's going to go in our notes. That's great. So thank you, Scott. We appreciate that. Scott, it wants us to consider closing the Dutcher Trail for 2 years. So that's definitely something that we will take offline and have further discussion about that. Dustin, do you want to add anything to that?
No, appreciate the comment.
Yep. Okay, good.
Lisa, this is Mike. I would say, as far as the closure of the Jim Dutcher Trail, we'll make that as short a duration as possible. Close it at the latest possible point and open it as quickly as we can. And like you said, we'll have some discussions about whether there's an opportunity to open it up periodically through construction if it makes sense and if it's safe to do so.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. And Christy, you probably don't have an invitation yet because you were CC'd on the email that starts about that is sort of the beginning of the discussion of when we can schedule the meeting. So behind scenes, we're trying to figure out schedules so that we can offer you a couple of time frames where that group can get together and meet. So you're on this, you are CC'd on that. And I have your email. I'll make sure that you're on it. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so we have a clear question answer board. Does anybody else have anything that they would like to, something else. Okay, so Kathy's recommending that we come to the public earlier in the design. I appreciate that, thank you. And that there are studies indicating a car costs the city while riding a bike earns money for the city. Well, and that would be great. That would be great, Kathy. Why don't you send me that data? Thank you. Okay, any more questions or comments? We'll wait another minute. So if you have some thoughts. And Mike, while we're waiting for folks to finalize any last minute questions they may have, do you want to add anything to the end of our meeting?
No, not really. Just thank you everyone for your time. I appreciate it. And yeah, maybe to speak to one of the questions about public comments, and we do really appreciate the comments. We try to find ways to say yes to things, but sometimes the answer is no. But public comment is important, and it does make a difference. So we definitely appreciate the public input.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So once again, thank you to everyone. It appears we have no more questions. So we will go ahead and shut this down. It's supposed to cool down a bit tonight. The roads are wet from it warming up today, so it might be slick. So everybody drive home safely. And thank you again so much for joining us. Good night.